My wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But that night, everything shattered. The one person I trusted the most betrayed me in a way I can never forget. What happened to me on what should have been the most sacred night of my life will haunt me forever. You see, betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes, it comes from the people closest to your heart, the people who are supposed to protect you. Instead, become the ones who destroy you. And when that betrayal happens on your wedding night, it changes everything. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. This is the story of Sarah Martinez, a 26-year-old teacher from Phoenix, Arizona. And this is the story of how her wedding night became her worst nightmare because of someone she called family. Sarah grew up in a tight-knit family. Her parents, Maria and Carlos, owned a small bakery in downtown Phoenix. She had two younger brothers, Miguel and David, and then there was Uncle Robert, her father's older brother, who had been like a second father to Sarah since she was born. Robert Martinez was 45 years old, unmarried, and had always been the family's protector. When Sarah's father worked long hours at the bakery, Uncle Robert was there. When she needed help with school projects, Uncle Robert was there. When she graduated college, Uncle Robert was in the front row, cheering louder than anyone else. Sarah adored him. She trusted him completely, with her life, with her secrets, with everything. And that trust would become her greatest nightmare. Growing up, Sarah never questioned Uncle Robert's constant presence. He lived just 3 blocks away from their family home, and he visited almost every day. During family gatherings, he was always the one making everyone laugh. He remembered everyone's birthdays, brought gifts for no reason, and was genuinely loved by the entire extended family. Sarah's friends often commented on how lucky she was to have such a caring uncle. "He's like your guardian angel," her best friend Jessica would say, and Sarah believed it. She truly believed that Uncle Robert was her guardian angel, sent to protect her from the world's dangers. She had no idea that the real danger was him. When Sarah met Thomas Williams at a teachers' conference 3 years before their wedding, Uncle Robert was the first person she called to share the news. Thomas was a kind, gentle man who taught high school math. He was everything Sarah had ever wanted in a partner: patient, funny, and completely devoted to her. Uncle Robert welcomed Thomas into the family with open arms, even helped him pick out the engagement ring. "You make my princess happy," Robert told Thomas the night he asked for Sarah's hand in marriage. "That makes you family." Thomas felt honored to have Robert's approval, not knowing the twisted thoughts that lurked behind that warm smile. The wedding preparations took 8 months. Sarah wanted everything to be perfect, and Uncle Robert made sure it was. He helped coordinate with vendors, paid for the flowers when the budget ran tight, and even gave a beautiful speech at the rehearsal dinner. "Sarah has been the light of our family since the day she was born," he said that night, tears in his eyes. "Tomorrow she becomes Thomas's light, and we couldn't be happier." The entire family was moved to tears, including Sarah, who hugged her uncle tightly. "Thank you for always being there for me," she whispered in his ear. "Always, princess," he whispered back. "I'll always be here for you." June 15th, 2023. Sarah's wedding day arrived with perfect Arizona sunshine. She woke up at 6 in the morning, her heart racing with excitement, not fear. Her mother, aunts, and bridesmaids filled her childhood bedroom, helping her get ready while sharing stories and laughter. Uncle Robert stopped by around noon to check on everyone, bringing coffee and pastries from the family bakery. "How's our beautiful bride?" he asked, giving Sarah a gentle kiss on her forehead. "Nervous but excited," she replied, beaming. "Good," he said, his eyes lingering on her a moment too long. "Today is your special day, princess. Make sure you remember every moment." Looking back now, Sarah wishes she had paid attention to the way he looked at her that morning. There was something different in his eyes, something she mistook for pride, but was actually something much darker. The ceremony took place at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church, the same church where Sarah was baptized and confirmed. 300 guests filled the pews, including Uncle Robert in the front row, right next to Sarah's parents. When Sarah walked down the aisle in her grandmother's wedding dress, Uncle Robert dabbed his eyes with his handkerchief. Later, people would comment on how emotional he seemed, how much he clearly loved his niece. They had no idea what he was really thinking as he watched her take those sacred vows. Thomas and Sarah exchanged rings at exactly 4:30 in the afternoon. "I promise to love you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life," Thomas said, his voice shaking with emotion. Sarah's response was equally heartfelt. "I promise to trust you completely, to share my whole heart with you, and to build a beautiful life together." Uncle Robert smiled as he listened to those vows, especially the word trust. He knew something Sarah didn't know yet, that her complete trust would soon become his weapon. The reception was held at the Desert Ridge Country Club, a beautiful venue with panoramic views of the Arizona mountains. Sarah had dreamed of this moment since she was a little girl, dancing with her new husband under twinkling lights while surrounded by everyone she loved. Uncle Robert gave another toast during dinner, this time talking about how proud he was to watch Sarah become a woman. "She'll always be my little princess," he said, raising his glass. "No matter how old she gets, no matter where life takes her, she'll always have a special place in my heart." The crowd applauded, and Sarah blew him a kiss from the head table. She had no idea that in just a few hours, those words would take on a completely different meaning. As the evening progressed, Uncle Robert danced with Sarah twice, once during the traditional family dance, and once more just before she and Thomas prepared to leave for their honeymoon suite. "I'm so happy, Uncle Robert," Sarah whispered as they swayed to the music. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, princess," he replied, holding her just a little too close. "And I want you to know, if you ever need anything at all, I'm always here for you." Sarah smiled, feeling safe and loved. "I know," she said. "You've always been my protector." "Yes," he said quietly, his breath warm against her ear. "I have." By 10 o'clock, the reception was winding down. Thomas and Sarah said their goodbyes, thanking everyone for making their day so perfect. Uncle Robert hugged Sarah extra tight, telling her he loved her and would see her when they returned from their honeymoon in Maui. "Have a wonderful time, princess," he said. "Make beautiful memories." Sarah hugged him back, feeling grateful for having such a loving family. As she and Thomas drove away in their decorated car, Sarah waved goodbye to Uncle Robert, who stood watching until their taillights disappeared into the night. The honeymoon suite at the Desert Ridge Resort was beautiful, decorated with rose petals and champagne waiting on ice. Sarah felt like she was living in a fairy tale, finally married to the man of her dreams, surrounded by love, with a bright future ahead of them. She and Thomas talked excitedly about their honeymoon, about the house they would buy, about the children they wanted to have. "I can't believe we're actually married," Sarah kept saying, admiring her wedding ring. "I can't believe how perfect everything was." Thomas agreed, commenting on how wonderful her family had been to him, especially Uncle Robert. "He really loves you," Thomas said. "You can see it in his eyes." Sarah nodded, smiling. "He's always been like that. Always protective, always caring. I'm so lucky to have him in my life." Around 11:30, Thomas went to take a shower. Sarah was still in her wedding dress, standing by the window, looking out at the city lights and reflecting on the perfect day. She heard a soft knock at the door and assumed it was room service with the champagne they had ordered. Without thinking, she opened the door with a bright smile, but instead of room service, Uncle Robert stood in the hallway. "Uncle Robert?" Sarah said, confused but still smiling. "What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" He stepped inside without being invited, closing the door behind him. "Everything's fine, Princess," he said, his voice different somehow. I needed to talk to you about something important." Sarah felt a flutter of concern. "What's wrong? Did something happen to Mom or Dad?" Uncle Robert shook his head, moving closer to her. "No, nothing like that. I've been thinking all day about what I wanted to tell you, about how much you mean to me." Sarah relaxed slightly, but something felt off. Uncle Robert had never looked at her the way he was looking at her now. "You look so beautiful tonight, Princess," he continued, reaching out to touch her face. Sarah instinctively stepped back. "Uncle Robert, you're scaring me a little. What's going on?" But instead of answering, he moved closer, backing her toward the bed. "I've watched you grow up into such a beautiful woman," he said, his voice thick with something Sarah couldn't identify. "And tonight you became someone else's. But before that happens completely, I needed to have my moment with you." The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't her protector uncle anymore. This was a predator. "Uncle Robert?" "No," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please don't do this. Please leave." But he didn't leave. Instead, he grabbed her wrist, his grip firm and frightening. "Shh, Princess," he said. "Don't make this difficult. You know how much I love you. You know how special you are to me." Sarah tried to pull away, but he was stronger. "Thomas will hear us," she warned, her voice barely audible. "Thomas is in the shower," Robert replied calmly. "And when he comes out, this will be our secret, just like when you were younger, and I would help you with your problems. This stays between us." What happened next? Sarah would never be able to fully put into words. The man who had been her protector, her second father, her guardian angel, became her worst nightmare. He forced himself into a moment that wasn't his to take. He stole something sacred from her on the night that was supposed to be about love and trust and new beginnings. Sarah felt her world crumble around her as the person she trusted most in the world betrayed that trust in the most horrific way possible. She didn't scream. She couldn't. Shock and disbelief paralyzed her voice. This couldn't be happening. Not on her wedding night. Not with Uncle Robert. Not with the man who taught her to ride a bike, who scared away the bullies at school, who walked her down the aisle when her father's back was hurting. When it was over, Uncle Robert straightened his clothes and looked at Sarah with the same gentle expression he had worn her entire life. "This never happened, Princess," he said softly, as if nothing had changed between them. "You know how much I love this family. You know I would never want to hurt anyone. So this stays between us, just like all our special moments have always stayed between us." Sarah stared at him in shock, unable to process what he was saying. "I need you to promise me," he continued, moving toward the door. "Promise me this stays our secret." Sarah couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't think. "Promise me, Sarah," he said again, his voice carrying a hint of the authority she had always respected. Almost involuntarily, she nodded. "Good girl," he said, smiling the same smile that had comforted her for 26 years. "I love you, Princess. I'll always love you." And then he was gone, leaving Sarah alone with her shattered world. Thomas emerged from the bathroom 5 minutes later, humming happily and talking about how perfect their wedding day had been. He found Sarah sitting on the edge of the bed, still in her wedding dress, staring at the floor. "Hey, beautiful," he said, not noticing her expression in his excitement. "Ready for the best night of our lives?" Sarah looked up at him, this wonderful man who loved her completely, and she couldn't find the words to tell him what had just happened. How could she explain that her own uncle had just destroyed the sanctity of their wedding night? How could she tell him that the man who gave such beautiful toasts about their love had just violated her in the most intimate way possible? "Sarah," Thomas said, noticing her silence. "Are you okay? You look pale." Sarah forced herself to smile, the first of thousands of fake smiles she would give over the next few years. "I'm fine," she whispered. "Just tired from the long day." Thomas nodded understandingly, gathering her in his arms for what should have been their first embrace as husband and wife. But all Sarah could feel was Uncle Robert's hands. All she could smell was his cologne. All she could hear was his voice telling her this was their secret. That night, as Thomas slept peacefully beside her, Sarah stared at the ceiling until dawn. She kept replaying the events, trying to make sense of what had happened. Had she imagined it? Had she somehow misunderstood Uncle Robert's intentions? But the physical evidence was there. The emotional trauma was real, and the memory was burned into her mind with crystal clarity. Her Uncle Robert, the man she had trusted above all others, had betrayed her in the most devastating way possible, and he had done it on her wedding night, stealing not just her sense of safety, but corrupting what should have been the most beautiful night of her life. The next morning, Sarah and Thomas flew to Maui for their honeymoon. Thomas was concerned about Sarah's quietness, but she blamed it on exhaustion and the overwhelming emotions of the wedding. "I just need a few days to process everything," she told him. "It's all been so wonderful but so intense." Thomas accepted this explanation, never suspecting that his new wife was carrying a secret that was eating her alive. For 7 days, Sarah went through the motions of being a happy newlywed, smiling for photos, enjoying romantic dinners, making love to her husband while trying to push Uncle Robert's violation out of her mind. But every night when Thomas fell asleep, Sarah would slip out onto the balcony and cry, mourning not just her innocence but her entire sense of reality. When they returned to Phoenix, life resumed its normal rhythm, except nothing was normal for Sarah anymore. Uncle Robert was at their welcome home dinner, warm and friendly as always, acting as if nothing had changed between them. He hugged Sarah like he always did, kissed her forehead like he always did, called her princess like he always did. But now every gesture felt like another violation. Sarah found herself avoiding his eyes, making excuses to leave when he visited, creating distance without being able to explain why. Her family noticed the change but attributed it to the natural adjustment of being newly married. "She's probably just focused on Thomas now," her mother said when someone commented on Sarah's quietness around Uncle Robert. "That's normal for newlyweds." But Uncle Robert knew exactly why Sarah was pulling away, and he wasn't going to let her escape that easily. He began finding reasons to be alone with her, dropping by her classroom after school, showing up at the grocery store when she was shopping, calling her cell phone when he knew Thomas was at work. "We need to talk, Princess," he would say. "I can see you're struggling with what happened, and I want to help you through it." Each interaction made Sarah feel more trapped, more helpless, more convinced that she could never tell anyone the truth. Uncle Robert was beloved by their entire family, respected in their community, trusted by everyone who knew him. Who would believe her story? And what would it do to her parents, her brothers, her marriage, if she spoke up? 3 months after the wedding, the pattern escalated. Uncle Robert's visits became more frequent, his touches more inappropriate, his demands for private conversations more insistent. He would show up at Sarah and Thomas's new house when Thomas was at work, letting himself in with the spare key Sarah's parents had given him for emergencies. "We're family," he would remind her when she protested. "Family takes care of each other, and you need someone to help you deal with the confusion you're feeling." Sarah felt powerless to stop him, trapped by his manipulation and her own fear of destroying the family she loved. The secret was consuming Sarah from the inside out. She lost weight, had trouble sleeping, and found herself unable to concentrate at work. Her students noticed that their usually energetic teacher seemed distracted and sad. Thomas noticed too. But every time he asked what was wrong, Sarah would deflect with excuses about work stress or adjusting to married life. "Maybe we should see a counselor," Thomas suggested one evening, after Sarah had been particularly withdrawn. Sometimes couples need help navigating the transition to marriage. Sarah panicked at the suggestion, terrified that a counselor might somehow uncover her secret. "I don't think that's necessary," she said quickly. "I'm fine. Everything's fine." But everything wasn't fine. Sarah was drowning in shame, convinced that she was somehow responsible for what had happened. Uncle Robert's words echoed in her mind constantly. "You know how special you are to me. You know how much I love you. This is just between us like it's always been." Had she somehow encouraged his behavior over the years? Had she been naive to trust him so completely? These thoughts tortured her, adding guilt to her already overwhelming trauma. She began to question her own memory, wondering if she had imagined the severity of what happened, if she was overreacting to what Uncle Robert might consider a moment of weakness. 6 months after the wedding, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. The joy she should have felt was immediately overshadowed by a terrifying question. Whose baby was she carrying? The timing made it impossible to know for certain, and the uncertainty added another layer of horror to her situation. She couldn't share her fears with Thomas, couldn't even fully acknowledge them to herself. Instead, she threw herself into preparing for motherhood, hoping that the love for her unborn child would somehow heal the wound in her soul. But even pregnancy couldn't erase the memory of that night, couldn't silence Uncle Robert's voice, couldn't restore her sense of safety in the world. Thomas was overjoyed about becoming a father, and Uncle Robert was equally excited about becoming a great uncle. "I can't wait to spoil this little one," he told Sarah at a family dinner, placing his hand on her growing belly. Sarah flinched at his touch, a reaction that didn't go unnoticed by her mother. "Sarah, are you feeling all right?" Maria asked. "You seem so jumpy lately." Sarah forced another smile, another lie. "Just hormonal," she said. "The doctor says it's normal." But nothing about her situation was normal, and the weight of carrying such a devastating secret while growing a new life was almost unbearable. When baby Emily was born 8 months later, she had Thomas's dark hair and Sarah's green eyes. The relief Sarah felt at seeing her daughter's features was overwhelming, but it was mixed with continued fear about Uncle Robert's presence in their lives. True to his word, he was determined to spoil his great niece, showing up at the hospital with flowers and gifts, volunteering to babysit whenever Sarah and Thomas needed help, inserting himself into their family life in ways that made Sarah feel constantly unsafe. "He's so good with her," Thomas would say, watching Uncle Robert hold baby Emily. "She's lucky to have such a devoted great uncle." Sarah would smile and nod, all while feeling sick to her stomach. The first year of Emily's life was both a blessing and a curse for Sarah. She poured all her love and attention into her daughter, finding moments of genuine joy and healing in motherhood. But Uncle Robert's constant presence was a persistent reminder of her trauma. He would visit multiple times a week, always finding reasons to touch Sarah inappropriately when no one was looking, always reminding her with his eyes and his smile that their secret was still very much alive. "Our little princess is growing so fast," he would say, bouncing Emily on his knee while looking directly at Sarah. The word princess now made Sarah's skin crawl, but she couldn't ask him to stop using it without raising questions she wasn't prepared to answer. 2 years passed this way, with Sarah living in a constant state of hypervigilance and emotional numbness. She functioned well enough to maintain her job, her marriage, her role as a mother, but inside, she was slowly dying. The woman who had once been full of laughter and dreams was now just going through the motions of living. Thomas noticed the change. Everyone noticed the change, but no one understood the cause. "You've been different since Emily was born," Thomas said one night as they lay in bed. "I know motherhood is an adjustment, but I'm worried about you. Really worried." Sarah wanted desperately to tell him everything, to unburden herself of the secret that was poisoning their marriage. But the fear was still too strong. What if he didn't believe her? What if he blamed her? What if it destroyed everything they had built together? The breaking point came on Emily's 2nd birthday. Uncle Robert had organized a family barbecue at his house, insisting that it would be perfect for the little girl's celebration. Sarah tried to get out of it, claiming Emily wasn't feeling well, but the family pressure was too strong. "She's fine," Uncle Robert said when Sarah mentioned Emily's supposed illness, "and I've already bought all the decorations. Princess Emily deserves a perfect party." As the afternoon progressed, Sarah watched Uncle Robert interact with Emily, saw the same gentle attention he had once given her, and suddenly realized with crystal clarity that the pattern could repeat itself. Her daughter was safe for now, too young to be at risk. But what about in a few years? What about when Emily was old enough to trust her great-uncle completely, the way Sarah had once trusted him? That night, after the family had gone home and Emily was asleep, Sarah sat in her kitchen and finally acknowledged the truth she had been avoiding for 2 years. She couldn't continue living with this secret, not just for her own sanity, but for her daughter's safety. Uncle Robert had shown no remorse for what he had done, no indication that it was a one-time mistake, and his continued manipulation suggested he would escalate again if given the opportunity. Sarah realized that her silence wasn't protecting her family. It was putting them all in danger. The next morning, Sarah called in sick to work and drove to the offices of the Maricopa County Family Crisis Center. She had researched the location online, had read about their confidential counseling services, and had finally found the courage to seek help. Walking through those doors was the hardest thing she had ever done, but also the most important. For the first time in 2 years, Sarah was choosing her own healing over her fear. "My name is Sarah Martinez," she told the intake counselor, her voice shaking, "and I need help. Someone in my family, someone I trusted completely and hurt me, and I don't know how to live with it anymore." The counselor, a gentle woman named Dr. Patricia Hernandez, listened to Sarah's story without judgment, without disbelief, without the shocked reaction Sarah had feared. "What you experienced was sexual assault," Dr. Hernandez said clearly, "and the fact that it was perpetrated by a family member makes it even more traumatic. You've been carrying this burden alone for too long." For the first time since her wedding night, Sarah heard someone validate her experience. Someone confirm that what happened to her was real, was wrong, and wasn't her fault. The relief of being believed, of being understood, brought a flood of tears that had been building for 2 years. Over the following weeks, Sarah began the long process of healing. She learned about trauma responses, about why victims often remain silent, about the complex dynamics of family sexual abuse. Dr. Hernandez helped her understand that her silence had been a survival mechanism, not cowardice or complicity. "You did what you needed to do to cope," she explained, "and now you're ready to do what you need to do to heal." Sarah began to see that telling her story wasn't a betrayal of her family. It was an act of love. Love for herself, love for her daughter, and even love for other potential victims who might be saved by her courage. The hardest conversation of Sarah's life was with Thomas. 3 months after beginning therapy, she finally found the strength to tell her husband what had happened on their wedding night. She had rehearsed the words dozens of times, had written them down, had practiced with Dr. Hernandez. But nothing could have prepared her for the actual moment. "Thomas," she said one evening after Emily was in bed, "I need to tell you something about our wedding night. Something that's been destroying me for the past 2 years." Thomas put down the book he was reading and gave her his full attention, sensing the gravity of what was coming. When Sarah finished her story, Thomas was quiet for a long time. Sarah braced herself for disbelief, for anger, for rejection. Instead, Thomas moved closer to her on the couch and pulled her into his arms. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, tears in his own eyes. "I'm so sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry you felt you couldn't tell me. And I'm sorry that monster made you carry this alone." His belief in her story, his immediate support, his lack of blame or judgment was more healing than Sarah had dared to hope for. "What do you need from me?" Thomas asked. "How can I help you through this?" For the first time in 2 years, Sarah felt like she wasn't facing her trauma alone. Together, Sarah and Thomas decided to report Uncle Robert to the police. It was a terrifying decision, one that they knew would tear their family apart. But it was the right decision. Detective Maria Santos of the Phoenix Police Department took Sarah's statement with the same professionalism and compassion that Dr. Hernandez had shown. "I know this is difficult," Detective Santos said, "but you're incredibly brave for coming forward. Family sexual abuse is one of the most underreported crimes because of exactly the dynamics you've described. Your courage could prevent this from happening to someone else." The investigation that followed was both validating and excruciating. Other family members were interviewed, Uncle Robert was questioned, and slowly, a picture emerged of a man who had carefully cultivated his image as the perfect family member while harboring dark secrets. During the investigation, Detective Santos discovered that Sarah wasn't Uncle Robert's only victim. Two of Sarah's female cousins, now adults living in other states, came forward with their own stories of abuse at Uncle Robert's hands. The pattern went back years, possibly decades, and had been hidden by the same family loyalty and trust that had kept Sarah silent. When Uncle Robert was arrested 6 months later, the family was devastated. Sarah's parents initially struggled to believe the accusations against their beloved brother-in-law, but the evidence was overwhelming. "How could we not have seen it?" her mother cried. "How could we not have protected our own children?" Sarah's father was consumed with guilt, blaming himself for trusting Robert, for allowing him so much access to their family. The arrest made local news, and the shame of having their private trauma made public was almost as difficult as the trauma itself. The trial took place 18 months after Sarah first walked into the crisis center. By then, she had found her voice, her strength, and her determination to see justice done. Taking the witness stand was terrifying, but Sarah felt supported by Thomas, by Dr. Hernandez, by Detective Santos, and by her own newfound courage. "He told me it was our secret," she testified, looking directly at Uncle Robert for the first time since her wedding night. "He used my love for him, my trust in him, to violate me in the most intimate way possible. And then he used my shame and fear to keep me quiet." Uncle Robert's defense attorney tried to paint Sarah as a confused young woman who had misinterpreted her uncle's affections, but the testimony of multiple victims and the clear pattern of abuse made his arguments weak. Uncle Robert was convicted on multiple counts of sexual assault and sentenced to 15 years in prison. The judge, a woman who had presided over many similar cases, addressed him directly during sentencing. "You betrayed the most sacred trust that exists, the trust between a family member and a vulnerable person in their care. You used your position of authority and love to commit unspeakable acts. The damage you have caused to these women and their families is immeasurable." As Uncle Robert was led away in handcuffs, Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, sadness, anger, and finally, freedom. The healing process didn't end with the trial. Sarah continued her therapy, worked on rebuilding her relationship with her parents and brothers, and slowly learned to trust again. Some family members cut ties with her, unable to accept that their beloved Robert could have done such things, but others rallied around her with support and love. "We failed you," her father said through tears at a family gathering 6 months after the trial. "We should have protected you. We should have seen the signs. We should have believed you immediately." Sarah hugged her father tightly, finally feeling like she had her family back, or at least the members who mattered most. Thomas and Sarah's marriage grew stronger through the ordeal. The secrets that had been poisoning their relationship were finally gone, replaced by complete honesty and deeper intimacy. "I wish I could go back and protect you that night," Thomas said one evening as they watched Emily play in their backyard. "I wish I could have stopped it from happening." Sarah took his hand and squeezed it gently. "You couldn't have known," she said. "But you protected me when I finally found the courage to tell you. You believed me. You supported me. You helped me find my strength. That's what matters now. Today, 5 years after that devastating wedding night, Sarah is a different woman. She's still a teacher, still a wife, still a mother. But she's also a survivor, an advocate, and a voice for others who have experienced family sexual abuse. She speaks at conferences, counsels other survivors, and works with law enforcement to improve how these cases are handled. My wedding night was supposed to be about love and trust and new beginnings, she says when she tells her story. Instead, it became about betrayal and trauma and shattered illusions. But I refused to let that night define the rest of my life. I survived. I spoke up. I found justice. And most importantly, I found my voice. Emily is now 7 years old, a bright, happy child who has never been alone with a male family member for even a moment. Sarah has taught her daughter about body autonomy, about the difference between appropriate and inappropriate touch, and about the importance of speaking up if anyone ever makes her uncomfortable. Some secrets are good secrets, like surprise parties, Sarah tells Emily. But some secrets are bad secrets that hurt people, and bad secrets should always be told to someone you trust. It's a conversation Sarah never thought she would have to have with her daughter, but it's also one of the most important conversations she's ever had. Sarah's story is one of devastating betrayal, but it's also one of incredible courage. It's a story about the power of speaking truth, even when that truth is painful and complicated and threatens to tear apart everything you hold dear. It's a story about the importance of believing survivors, even when their accusations seem impossible to accept. And it's a story about the strength of the human spirit, about our ability to heal from even the most profound trauma when we have support, resources, and the courage to seek help. The man who was supposed to be Sarah's protector became her predator, but Sarah refused to remain his victim. She found her voice, she found her strength, and she found her way back to the light. That's the real ending to this story. Not the nightmare of that wedding night, but the triumph of a woman who refused to be silenced by shame and fear. What would you have done if you were in Sarah's position? Would you have found the courage to speak up, knowing it would tear your family apart? Would you have been able to trust again after such a devastating betrayal? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe for more stories of survival, courage, and the incredible resilience of the human spirit.